Welcome to Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. I'm Julia Elliott-Brown, the founder and CEO of Enter the Arena. I'm a serial entrepreneur and an expert in raising investment and business growth. Our mission at Enter the Arena is to empower female founders to fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business with investment expertise and business coaching. Here we share the stories of inspirational female founders who've raised investment to inspire you to do the same. You'll hear their honest accounts of what it was really like to secure funding, the highs, the lows, and the challenges they experienced on the journey. And along the way, we'll discuss top tips for how you can be successful too. So today I'm speaking with Sarah Merrick, who's the founder and CEO of Ripple, an innovative clean energy ownership platform. Sarah set up Ripple to enable household consumers to own their own source of clean power and transform the ownership of the UK's energy assets. And what they do is enable people to part own wind farms and solar parks so that you can have clean, low-cost electricity that is produced by those wind farms and solar parks supplied to their own homes, which is absolutely genius. Sarah's goal is for half the homes in the markets that they operate in to own their own source of clean energy by 2050, and I'm sure she's going to get there. Sarah's worked in the wind energy sector for 19 years, and prior to setting up Ripple, she was the head of public affairs for Vestas, the world's largest wind turbine manufacturer. Prior to that, as an economist in the global strategy team at RES, the wind farm developer, and alongside her role at Vestas, she was also vice chair of RenewableUK, the UK's trade body for wind and marine energy. So she certainly knows what she's talking about when it comes to wind energy. In 2019, Sarah secured £856,000 of investment for the growth of her business through crowdfunding on a pre-money valuation of 2.5 million. And Ripple was awarded Startup of the Year by Seedrs investors and by Business Green. So some incredible accolades. This really is a wonderful business. Sarah is a super smart entrepreneur, and I'm sure you'll all be looking forward to hearing her fundraising story. So welcome to the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you for having me. Really good to be here.
Great to have you here. So we were just talking about all your fabulous experience in the energy industry. So you obviously know what you're talking about when it comes to clean energy and wind farms. But how did you come up with the whole idea for the business in the first place?
So in my role at Vestas, we were, part of my role was sort of speaking to politicians. And so I was telling politicians that wind had now become the UK's cheapest source of power. And also that actually, aside from sort of people not liking it, it's actually one of the most popular forms of electricity in the UK as well. And the industry was wondering what it can do in a sort of post-subsidy environment because subsidies were being phased out. And people sort of were looking at, okay, we'll sell our electricity to Google and Facebook and Amazon. And it's like, right, there's one of those. That's not going to be the sort of complete solution. So I thought, actually, it's not right that me as an individual, I can't access myself, what is now the UK's cheapest source of electricity. Only the big guys like Amazon and Google can. So I set up Ripple to enable individual households like me to be able to own their own source of clean power and get direct access to the UK's cheapest source of electricity, which was large-scale onshore wind and large-scale solar as well.
Amazing. So so you were kind of working at Vestas when you had the idea. So at what point did you take this leap out of the corporate world to working in your startup? Did you kind of do it in tandem, or did you just kind of quit the job and go for it? What was your strategy?
So I set up Ripple in January 2017, and I was doing as much as I could, like at the weekends and in the evenings and stuff. And then I could do sort of so much within my contract, given sort of confidentiality and other clauses. So I sort of said to them, can I work part-time to do it, to sort of work on it a bit more and get out of these different bits of my contract? And they thought about it, and they sort of said no, basically. So I said then I had to, I'd said, it's either I can either do it or this is definitely what I want to do. So then I handed my notice in I think April 2017. Had the summer off, spent loads of time with the kids because I knew it was going to be crazy once we sort of got onto it full time. And then I started working full time on it in September 2017. So that's 2 and a bit years ago. But yeah, I mean, I knew from January 2017, I knew this is what I wanted to do. It was just about, whether I could sort of maintain the day job for a little bit longer. But yeah, no, the decision point was January 2017 when I set the company up, and then after that there was sort of no going back. That was definitely what I wanted to do, and I just haven't looked back since, really.
And what was it, out of interest, that was the real driver for that? Was it for you about having your own company, or was it that you just felt absolutely compelled to solve the problem, or did you want to have a different work-life balance? What was kind of really pulling you towards doing that?
I thought it had to happen, and it should happen. And where I was sort of right in the centre of the industry, speaking to everyone on the cutting edge of the sector, no one was doing it. So it was a bit of, if nobody else is doing it, I'll just do it myself then, sort of thing. So it was just because nobody else was doing it, and it just seemed like something that consumers should be able to do, and it wasn't really in anyone's interest to make it happen. So electricity suppliers wouldn't necessarily want it to happen, developers weren't necessarily in the position for it to happen, so you sort of needed to have a brand new company with a new perspective making it happen. So yeah, I set up Ripple to do just that, really.
To properly shaking up an industry very dominated by big players.
Yeah, exactly.
So early days, I'm imagining you put your own savings into the business, but also I know you had some funding from friends and family. So tell us about that. How did that come about? How did you feel going to friends and family to ask them to back you?
So I think they all love it. Whenever I tell anyone about Ripple and what the concept is, they just love it. So yeah, sort of getting family on board was very straightforward. There was a woman who I've known all through my career. I've been talking to her about it a lot. She invested, and it wasn't a hard sell at all. People wanted to get involved. So that side of it was actually very, very straightforward, and people just wanted, they really, really wanted to be involved and be part of something that was just so new. And I think they did have confidence in me that I could deliver it as well, which was fantastic. So yeah.
So those two things. I mean, it's right. It's one of those ideas when you kind of hear about it, you think that's brilliant, but an idea on its own isn't enough. It has to be executed by an amazing entrepreneur, which you clearly are. So good, you instilled that confidence. And so how far did that get you in terms of that funding? How along your journey?
So that got us to, I think we did that raise in, April 2018. And then that got us to sort of like the end of 2018, really. So by that point, we had an angel investor on board, and he was fantastic. So he was able to come January 2019. He was able to sort of loan us some money just in advance of his investment, really. But yeah, that the friends and family got us to the end of 2018, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so at that point, you sort of still working up the idea. You still hadn't launched the business, had you?
No. So it was just there were three of us on board at that point. One guy working on wind farm projects, just finding the best projects available. Another guy working on the tech side, and then me sort of covering everything else, really.
Okay. So to get your first wind farm project off the paper into reality, is that something that needs quite a bit of capital investment? What did you really need to put funding in?
So in terms of actually building the wind farm, that will be what our customers put in. But in terms of us preparing to be able to get to the point at which customers can put money into a wind farm, there's a lot of legal work. So we've had to sort of develop our own whole legal framework to make it happen. So that's sort of a contract between us and the electricity supply partners, us and the wind farm, us and the cooperative, and various contracts between the different parties. Obviously that costs money to get all those contracts drawn up. We had to get a cooperative set up, so there was more cost involved in sort of engaging with the Financial Conduct Authority to make sure they were happy with the structure. We've had a bit of marketing costs, and then there's also sort of due diligence costs as well, in terms of, we have to make sure that when we launch a wind farm, that we're confident that it is a good project. And yeah, those are the main costs, basically, sort of legal, marketing, and then due diligence, as well as obviously salaries as well.
Yeah, okay. So you got to a point where you thought, actually, we need to raise some more money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that first of all, you started having a chat with some venture capital firms. So tell us how those conversations went.
I think we were just too early. I think being pre-revenue was a challenge for quite a few of them. I think it was the combination of being pre-revenue and a totally new concept was just a bit much. So, and even at that point, we only had a couple of hundred customers sort of pre-registered. So it was all very, very new and unproven. So yeah, we had probably spent, I don't know, 5-6 months sort of engaging with VCs, probably looking back a bit too long. And so we made the decision beginning of, what would it be, 2019, that actually crowdfunding was going to be a much better way of securing the investment. Yeah. And so we started then just working towards the crowdfunding raise.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk about crowdfunding a little bit. So one of the first decisions you have to make with crowdfunding is deciding which platform to raise on. Was that a difficult decision for you? And tell us about how you made the decision.
No, it wasn't particularly difficult. So we looked at a few different, I was only the two main platforms really. And the team at Seedrs were just really responsive, really helpful, and talked us through the process really well. So we decided to go with them. There wasn't a huge amount, we sort of obviously compared them on various different metrics, and they were not massively different on quite a few. So we ended up choosing Seedrs primarily because they were really, really responsive to our questions, and they wanted to engage.
Yeah, I mean, that's important, isn't it? Because it's it's a serious thing doing a crowdfund, isn't it? There's a lot involved. So you want to make sure that the team you're working with are supportive, are going to help you, all of that stuff. So that's a really, really important thing to look out for. And also, I know one of the things that people talk about with crowdfunding is about a nominee structure. Was that something that you looked at? So this nominee structure where when you do crowdfunding, instead of having 200, 300, 400 investors that all sit on your cap table, you actually just get the crowdfunding platform as the investor on your platform. Was that a factor for you at all?
Yeah, I mean, it just made it so much simpler, just having them. It's a bit like what Ripple does. We are the interface between thousands of customers and the wind farm. Seedrs is that interface between our thousands of investors, isn't it? What, thousands investors. So yeah, it was a lot easier, really.
Okay. So this challenge of kind of getting investors on board when you're pre-launch, pre-revenue, what kind of information did you feel that investors needed to see to get that confidence that this was a business that was going to work, that it was going to be a business that would have product to market fit and a business that could scale?
I think it's getting the key concepts out there and getting people to understand that this is something that is possible. And I think sort of going back to the sort of VC versus crowdfunding, I think crowdfunding investors saw it through their consumer eyes rather than their investor eyes, whereas lots of VCs were sort of focused on, what's a customer's IRR? And it's like, well, customers aren't that hung up on what their return on investment is. There is it's a good return, but in terms of they were definitely seeing Ripple as they were sort of assessing the sort of customer proposition in the same way that they would assess an investment proposition as a VC. And actually, customers don't do that. And all of our research found that actually customers' main driver beyond by a significant margin, is they want to act on climate change. Getting a saving on their electricity bill or making a return on their investment is a second order priority for them. But VCs really, really focused on what is their rate of return, whereas crowdfunding investors were able to just see that it's a fantastic product and something that really fits with their values and something that they would personally want to do. So it meant that they could then, I think it really chimed with them, just getting that core concept out, and that this is something that they would want to do as a consumer. I think that was really the most important thing. And then being able to answer, because we were so new, being able to answer people's, obviously people had loads and loads of questions. It wasn't something, it wasn't another whatever online retailer of a specific product. It was so new. So we did spend a lot of time answering people's questions, and we took a very deliberate decision early on that we were going to answer those questions really, really comprehensively. We set out obviously what the concept was, what the sort of revenues were, we couldn't obviously name who our supply partners were or anyone that we were sort of talking to. But I think by providing those sorts of comprehensive answers, it gave people just more confidence that we knew what we were talking about, really.
It's interesting, that distinction you made between VCs and crowdfunding. That it's that kind of head versus heart thing, isn't it? And VCs are very, very focused on metrics, which is why one of the factors that they tend to come in a bit later when a business has proved those metrics. But when you're going on a kind of heart-based decision, that gut feel, it's an easier one, I think, with crowdfunding, as you've identified. So the Q&A,
I think just because people see that it's them as an individual, they would want to do it. It does make such a huge difference, basically, to how people act.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the Q&A thing is interesting on crowdfunding, isn't it? Because when you're raising investment from angel investors or from venture capital companies, you're often dealing with quite difficult questions face to face, really put on the spot. But with crowdfunding, it's all done online. So there's a bit more time for you to really put together very thorough and considered answers. Isn't that the case?
Yes, yeah. And there were some, some more established companies were, obviously you can read how they're responding to their questions. And some were just saying, we're not going to answer that. That's commercially sensitive. We knew that in our position being so new, we couldn't just say, we're not going to answer it. So, so we answered everything very, very thoroughly, but also quickly. So the whole team, three of us would, we would go through what the questions were, and then we would allocate, okay, this is best for somebody to answer. And I think pretty much every single question was answered within 24 hours of it going on the platform. Most of them significantly sooner than that. Yeah. Because people want to be able to see what the answers are. They can obviously see there's a question there, and and you would get threads of more investors sort of chipping in with, but what about this and what about that? And it was just a really good way to be able to elaborate on the sorts of information. We obviously had our pitch video, and you have your sort of pitch content as well, but it was just a really good way to explain in a bit more depth and sort of really drill into, okay, this is what people want to know more about. So we could take our signals from our potential investors to say, okay, this is something that they want more information about, so we can give them specific information on that one issue.
And actually, the more questions you get, I think that the more there's a sign that people are interested. I'm always concerned when there's like tumbleweeds on a Q&A page. Yeah, people just aren't that interested. Okay, so lots of questions on there. But did you ever worry with all of that? Did you think, gosh, if I put this information out in the public domain, who's going to get their hands on this information? This is such a new and exciting idea. Will somebody else steal it? The reason I asked that question is a lot of entrepreneurs that I deal with are really, really worried about crowdfunding because they don't want this information, this sensitive information, getting out there. What was your view on that?
Yeah, we were concerned about it. I think, again, because it's such a new concept, I can't remember whether it was in the Lean Startup where it says, you try and tell your main competitor this is my idea, go and do it. And they're so busy doing their own thing, they are not going to be doing that. And we didn't have any really obvious direct competitors because we were so new. You know, our competitors would be, well, the most obvious ones would be sort of green electricity suppliers. The model wouldn't really work if they tried to do it themselves, and sort of rooftop solar providers. But again, it wasn't really something that they would necessarily be able to do themselves. So yeah, we were sort of, we were concerned about it, but also we weren't particularly in a position to, you know, we weren't necessarily in a position to just say, no, we're not going to answer that question. And so actually, you know, the benefits of being able to answer questions comprehensive. I mean, we were, obviously, there were certain things that we didn't say. You know, we had a lot of stuff that would be covered by NDAs that we just clearly weren't able to say. And, you know, like, so which suppliers were we talking to was a big question that kept coming up, and we just can't answer that question because it's all covered by NDA. So yeah, I mean, really, really commercially sensitive stuff. We obviously didn't and couldn't share, but in terms of the sort of comprehensiveness of the answers, it, you know, we would obviously leave the gap where there was a gap that needed to be left because it was confidential. But in terms of, you know, being able to elaborate in quite a lot of detail, I think it did, the benefits sort of far outweighed the risks, really.
Yes, I think that's interesting for people to think about. And so what, in terms of the balance of the number of investors that came in, how many investors did you get in the end on that campaign? Do you remember?
1,080, which
wow.
Was for a company with, you know, no track record and, you know, very, very few pre-registered customers when we started. It was amazing. And I think it put us in like the top 5% for investor numbers of any campaign on Seedrs website. So we were really, really pleased. It just really struck a chord with investors, and they just loved it.
Yeah, I mean, what an incredible validation of your idea, really. Yeah. But I imagine actually with the fact that you had so many investors on your campaign, that you had quite a lot of smaller investors, which is always quite nice. Did they mostly come from your network, or how did you reach those investors? How did you communicate with them?
Yeah, we were surprised at how few came from our sort of well, not how few, but how many didn't come from our network, essentially. We were sort of expecting it to be far more, you know, sort of continuation of friends and family, essentially, but the vast majority we didn't know. And so the fact that they were, sort of, it was genuinely crowdfunding and not necessarily our crowd. Obviously, we did have, you know, our friends and family and sort of, you know, network did invest, but the number of people outside of our network was just phenomenal, really, really phenomenal. Yeah, and it's just great that there are people, you know, some were customers, and they who might have already pre-registered, they'd have heard about Ripple on Twitter and stuff, but there were just loads of people who we had no connection to at all. And I think that's part of the benefit of crowdfunding platforms like Seedrs, because they already have a lot of existing investors, and obviously all those existing investors, you know, they get to see what's being launched on the platform at all times. And so if, you know, you just get access to such a huge number of investors, it was, yeah, quite amazing.
I think it's quite rare, I mean, your case, I think, and no wonder you've won so many awards, because most people do find that it's usually 80% or something like that of their own network that come in on a crowdfunding campaign, and the rest.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you've definitely bucked the trend there, and I think that, I imagine that your business really resonates with investors on lots of different levels, and that's why.
And I think it didn't hurt that over the course, so we did the crowdfunding sort of April to June. You know, during that time, you had the David Attenborough documentary on the BBC, you had Extinction Rebellion, you had Greta Thunberg. You know, climate change was really, really in the news at the time. And obviously since then, there has been a real step change. As somebody that's worked in the wind industry for 19 years, things are different. In the last 12 months, things have changed. And we were sort of right at the start of that real changing gear in terms of how individuals viewed climate change, and that it wasn't like, if there was going to be a solution, it was which solution will it be? But there will be a solution and there will be action. And so it was about sort of, Ripple was able to sort of show, okay, this is one of these solutions that there will be. And we sort of fitted into the sort of public narrative quite well at the time. And then that's just carried on.
So riding the wave, which is, and sometimes sometimes that's something you just can't predict. And, if you'd have run that campaign a year ago, you probably would have had a very, very different outcome, but the timing of it was really perfect.
I think it was a huge shift in, is there going to be climate action, to what climate action is there going to be? And it just, from a sort of broader, not just our campaign perspective, that's a really important step for the whole of society to have taken, but we were able to just present ourselves as one of these solutions that there will be to climate change, and people really got that.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite questions for entrepreneurs to address when they're putting a pitch together is, why now? Because lots of people have great ideas, but if you can answer the why now question, it makes it so much more compelling, and you clearly did that.
And it's been quite interesting, sort of, we've started a second round now, and we haven't had a single question about, what is a customer's IRR? Because when we say customers want to act on climate change, 18 months later, people totally get that. And there isn't the sort of quibbling about, what percentage is okay and what isn't. It's just people, and obviously investors, they get that people are desperate to act on climate change, and they want a solution that works within their lifestyles, and it won't mean, giving up X, Y, and Z. It's things have. There's been a fundamental shift in how everyone views climate solutions, and I think the timing for us has worked really well.
Yeah. And it means all that money you raise, instead of having to invest in the education of the market, you can put that money into marketing, preaching to the converted rather than knocking on closed doors, which investors are going to love. And for you, I think we've talked about how about female entrepreneurs and kind of what's been going on with women raising investment. Obviously, still, sadly, only around 2% of funds go to women, but more and more women like you are being super successful. But quite rare, I think, to see female founders building a business like yours in a non-traditional female sector, if that's the right way to put it, without sort of meaning to alienate anyone. How did you find it as a female founder raising investment? Did you come across any bias at all, conscious or unconscious? Or did you not see?
Not massively at all, actually. I think I was expecting more. There was one meeting with an investor, which was, he was very patronising, and I'd sort of assume part of his attitude was because I was a woman. But that was the exception. All the other meetings that I had were, very good. But I think I think crowdfunding does work quite well for women. I think because you haven't got, you can sort of engage with people far more directly. But I personally didn't have any. I didn't feel like I sort of was facing any barriers. But then it is very, when I first learned that statistic about the 2%, it really took me back, and I sort of had to apologise to the team for being like a sort of female founder. But there's nothing particularly that I could sort of point to at all, which is great. But then obviously that 2% stat is there. There must be reasons for that being there, which isn't that these are terrible businesses. There's nothing obvious that I can sort of point to that would be that was any difficulty that I faced at all. It was fine.
Do you think, I mean, I'm interested to know, kind of in the energy industry, which you've got, you know, where you've been all your working life, really, whether is that, is that a very sort of male industry, or is it quite balanced? The reason I ask that question is I find that female founders who come from an industry where it is quite male dominated tend to find it much easier going out and talking to investors, because they're used to speaking that sort of language, whereas women who've come from a very female dominated industries struggle more when it comes to speaking the language of investors.
I think the energy industry as a whole is very male dominated. The renewables sector as a subset of that has a lot more women in it. So I think I've been very, very used to being part of that very male dominated energy sector, but being, and being used to, renewables for a long time have been the sort of, they've been seen as a niche part of the industry. And I've, my whole career has been, being part of that sort of what was considered a niche. In the last few years, it's totally not a niche thing anymore, and renewables are, supplying 10 times as much electricity as the coal sector is. So, over the last few years, renewables themselves have come into the mainstream. So, yeah, I mean, I've not grown up, but all my career I've had, been very, very used to dealing in a very, very male-dominated market, and just, having to hold my own in those sorts of conversations, but more holding my own as somebody that works in, what was seen as a sort of, kooky wind sector, rather than, necessarily sort of being a woman. But yeah, it's just something that I've got used to. And yeah, it doesn't faze me at all, being in that sort of, being in that sort of dynamic, really.
That's interesting. So that confidence you've built up over the years obviously has stood you in great stead.
Yeah. And and a lot of it is people that from that quite conventional, the experts who have been in the wind or not the electricity sector for, decades, saying that wind couldn't ever do what it's just proven to do over the last 10 years, and then ultimately being wrong. It does give you fantastic confidence to just, to have been around when these things have been, it can't possibly happen, to, oh, look, it just has, and we've proved you all wrong. It's a fantastic backdrop to then, being in a position of having to raise investment.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that you're doing another round now. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so we're raising a second round to drive our growth, essentially. So we're about to launch our first project. So once that's launched, well, then the concept will be proven. There'll be customers signed up, having paid their money and owning a bit of the wind farm. So then we just want to repeat that over and over again with more and more projects on the platform, more and more customers, and then moving into more and more markets very quickly. So we're raising investment to enable us to do just that.
Okay, and will that be? Will you raise in the UK, or would you consider raising investment abroad, given that you want to expand internationally?
Yeah, so I've just got back from San Francisco at the end of January, and met quite a few investors out there. So yeah, we're not particularly. We're not sort of excluding overseas investors at all, and certainly we've got a lot of interest from VCs in the US. So it'll just be, whether it's a combination or quite what, but we're certainly not, we're not saying, okay, you have to be a UK investor for this round. We're open to discussions with everyone, really.
Out of interest, having met those VCs in the States, and also I know you've met lots of VCs here in the UK, perhaps at a slightly earlier point, did you see a difference between the way they deal with risk, the kind of size of investments they want to put in? Was that something you noticed?
I think they, it's a bit difficult to compare, because Ripple as the company has moved on 18 months anyway, so it's a far more de-risked company than it was 18 months ago. I think in general people are quite open to to new ideas in the US. I think, one bit of advice I got from a VC was that US VCs in particular want to see ideas that can scale in the US. So if you are in the UK, that's great, but they're likely to want you to be able to scale in the US as well as just the UK. So yeah, that was a really handy bit of advice that I got while I was out there, because yeah, I think if you're a company that has got no plans at all to enter the US market, you would be probably a bit less attractive to a US VC than if you're one that is planning on getting into the US quite soon.
Yeah, makes sense. Fantastic. Well, I wish you all the very best on that round. I'm sure you'll be successful. So before we finish up, have you got any kind of parting tips for all the female founders who are listening about, what you would have done differently, or a couple of things that you think they should really be focusing on when they're looking to raise investment?
I think know what your mission is, and be really clear about what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it, and also just think big. I think, we sort of touched on it a bit before, that lots of female-led companies focus on traditional female sectors, and people are potentially closing off a lot of the market with by focusing on those traditional sectors. So just think big and go for big ideas that can really make a massive difference to everyone, and get out of your comfort zone and just get in there with the big ideas. It's probably my parting advice.
Yeah, I mean, God, I know you're really at the start of this journey in terms of rolling out the concept, but if you pull it off, the difference you're going to make to consumers and the planet is actually really quite phenomenal. So when you're sitting here in 20 years' time, that's going to feel pretty amazing, right?
It's it can get huge, and that's it's a fantastic position to be in with something that could genuinely go massive. So it's great.
Well, brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, Sarah. And
no worries.
If you haven't already signed up for Ripple, go and check out their website and look at how you can pre-register to be a part owner of a wind farm and have your own owned energy supplied to your home, because what could be more brilliant than that? Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll speak to you.
Thank you.
Take care. Thanks for following Fundraising Stories with Female Founders. This content is all provided to you for free, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe so you never miss another one. Enter the Arena has helped hundreds of female founders fly through pre-raise and investment and onto the exponential growth of their business. Our first-hand experience, expert guidance, and proven programs help female founders unleash the Wonder Woman inside. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to www.enterthearena.co.uk. I'm Julia Elliott Brown, and I look forward to talking with you soon.